What does it take to turn a good idea into a great-looking sweater? This great-looking sweater, for instance. For years, we at Winona Knits have been transforming ideas into beautiful sweaters, and we think you should know more about us and how we go about producing the finest sweaters made in America today. To get a better picture of what we do here at Winona Knits, let's follow a sweater. This sweater, from conception to customer. A few years ago, Winona Knits became the official apparel sponsor for the American Birkebeiner ski race. This race, held every February near Hayward, Wisconsin, is the largest cross-country ski race in North America. The Birkebeiner Organizing Committee was interested in having sweaters and other goods that would commemorate their annual event, and they came to Winona Knits because of our reputation for outstanding design and quality workmanship. The Birkebeiner Foundation wanted a sweater that would appeal to the ski racers while exemplifying the ski race and its principles. Now that we have the basic idea, it's time to get to work. Winona Knits utilizes a number of suppliers and manufacturers for our various products, and the first step in making our sweater is to decide who should be entrusted to manufacture it. In this case, there is no question that it will be made by the Winona Knitting Mills, an independently owned and operated company in Winona, Minnesota. Our long and happy relationship with the nearby knitting mill allows us to enjoy constant input and feedback during the many steps necessary to produce such high-quality garments as the official Birkebeiner sweater. Before we start knitting, we have to have a design, and tasteful design is a hallmark of Winona Knits products. In the case of the Birkebeiner sweater, we work closely with the design staff of the Winona Knitting Mills. Their expertise in what can and cannot be done is invaluable when it comes to filling a special order such as this. Modern methods are used throughout the design stage. Take, for instance, the new computer-aided design program. Changes to possible designs can be made quickly, and color renderings of these designs can be had at the touch of a button. This newfound technology helps us to more quickly visualize the final product, and in the end, it gives us a better sweater, because it allows us more time to refine the specific details of each sweater we design. After the sweater has gone through the design stage, some prototypes are made up so that both the mill and the buyer will have a clear idea of what the final product will look like. Some of the prototypes are sent to the buyer, while the others are kept by the mill as a reference. These prototypes are often made up in different color combinations, so the buyer will have a choice in the appearance of the completed garment. When the sweater's design and color scheme have been approved by all concerned, it's time to order the appropriate labels and yarn. We chose cotton yarn for our Birkebeiner sweater because of its comfort and its easy maintenance. Also, our sweater will use American spun yarn and American-made labels so that we can be sure of their quality, durability, and availability. After the yarn is received from the spinning mill, it is stored here in this huge warehouse. But before it can be taken out of the cases and knit into Winona Knit sweaters, a cone of yarn is pulled from each lot shipped and is run through a battery of tests in this modern yarn lab. These various machines and instruments test the yarn for bleeding, or color fastness, pilling, and flammability. The friction of the yarn is determined so we are sure the sweater will drape evenly over the wearer's body and not bind due to uneven friction in the fabric. Also checked and recorded are the moisture content of cotton yarn, while wool is tested for oil content. Color matching is of course vital, and incoming yarn is tested for color against the yarn kept in the yarn standards room. This colorful room stores a sample of the yarns being used in current projects, and if the incoming yarn does not match perfectly with the standardized colors found here, it will not be used in a Winona Knit sweater. More yarn is rejected for inconsistent color than for any other reason. Finally, the tensile strength of the yarn is determined so that we can be certain that our sweaters will survive the day-to-day tugs and pulls required by modern sweaters. After all the designing, testing, and handling of the yarn, it's time to draw and punch the knitting cards that will instruct the knitting machine in its task. Our sweater is a so-called jacquard sweater. This means that the patterns in the sweater will be knitted directly into the fabric, not applied later. Everything on the machine, the yarn and the knitting cards, must be in exactly the right place, as the jacquard machine is quite unforgiving when it comes to errors of this kind. Now the magic of the machine takes over. Let's just watch and listen for a moment as our sweater comes to life. The jacquard knitting machines use these long closed-loop cards to instruct them to knit the right color yarn into exactly the right spot. These cards may look vaguely familiar, as they resemble an old-fashioned player piano roll. They work in just the same way. When the knitting machine detects a hole in the card, it knits. The jacquard system of knitting is well over a century old, but it still proves to be the best when it comes to producing the complex patterns seen in our Birkebeiner sweater. The knitting machine is stopped after the first few sections of fabric have been made, and these sections are then taken to the testing and transfer department. Here the test sections are washed and dried. Then they are tested for pattern accuracy, correct measurement, and overall finish of the fabric. Is the knit of the proper density and consistency? Are the colors in the right place? Red snowflakes and blue snow just won't do in a project like this. Errors, if any, are corrected here and now before the knitting machines make their final production runs. Everything, with the exception of buttons and yarn, is tested in the testing and transfer department. After the fabric has been knitted and checked, it gets sent over to the laundry. Wash day is every day when you're making sweaters, and these large machines can easily handle the thousands of pounds of fabric that go through them daily. The washing is electronically controlled, so that we can be sure that the fabric will emerge from this ordeal with the right feel and texture. After it's washed, the fabric is placed in these huge dryers and is carefully and evenly dried. Once dry, the fabric is separated and bundled for its trip to the ripping and steaming room. Ripping sounds like a disastrous thing to do to freshly knit fabric, but it is not what you might think. As the knitted fabric emerges from the knitting machines, it is actually in the form of one long tube. Ripping reduces this long tube into much shorter tubes. Ripping turns out to be the removal of a nylon cord that separates the individual parts of the sweater as they come out of the knitting machine. Removing the nylon cord breaks the fabric down into smaller, more easily handled sections. Once ripped, the fabric is steamed on these steaming tables to predetermined specifications. Steaming is done at this time so that the cutters will have a uniform piece of fabric to work with. Steaming is hot work, and the people who work at the steaming tables more than earn their pay. Once the people in the ripping and steaming room have had their turn, the sections of fabric are rebundled for transfer to the slitting and cutting area. Slitting is the process that opens the short tubes of fabric into flat panels so that they can be separated for the necessary centering and alignment. Then, the slit pieces are stacked into what is called a lay. Using a template and some chalk, the patterns for the sweater parts are drawn onto the topmost piece of fabric. Now the cutter uses this bandsaw to cut out dozens of sweater parts from the lay. After this crucial step has taken place, the pieces are hand-trimmed for the proper sizing and tension. Once the pieces are properly shaped, they are again put into bundles, and an exact count is made of all the sweater parts. It is important to keep the contents of the bundles in the right order. You wouldn't want to wear a sweater that had the arms of a small sewn onto the body of an extra large. While the body parts and sleeves were being knit and cut to shape, the collar of our sweater was being knit by these machines. If a Winona Knits sweater calls for a pocket or belt, these machines can be set up to handle that task as well. The completed collars are sorted out according to size and placed into the correct bundles so that all the parts of the sweater will be at hand for the next step in the manufacturing process. Now for the most intricate handwork, the actual sewing of the sweaters. Some of these sewers have been making sweaters for decades, and their handwork is one of the reasons that Winona Knit sweaters are so eagerly sought after by today's consumer. The sewing of our sweater is a rather involved process, and here is a quick lesson in an art that takes years to perfect. First, the shoulders of the garment are sewn together, making sure that the patterns on the front and back of the sweater match up. Our sweater also has a stiffening tape sewn into the shoulder at this time. The tape helps to better define the shape of the sweater's upper body. Next, sew up the sides of the body and sew up the sleeves. Again, pattern matchup is crucial, and this is where years of experience pay off. Now, put on the collar. The collar of our sweater is cover seamed. This is a process whereby thread is wrapped around the collar seam, giving it a finished look and a smooth feel on the back of the wearer's neck. Next, set the sewn-up sleeves into the body of the sweater, paying particular attention to the alignment of the garment. The speed at which the sewers work is remarkable, especially considering the attention to detail given each sweater. All this handwork is expensive and time-consuming, but it remains the best way to produce the best sweaters made in America today. One last touch is carried out by the sewers, and that is to sew the label into the back of the neck. This Winona Knits label assures the customer that he or she is buying the finest sweater available from any source. Now that the sweater has been knit and sewn together, it goes on to the finishing department, where it is clipped and turned. The people who do the clipping are responsible for trimming the inside seams of the sweater, while the turners are given the task of turning the sweater right side out so that it will be ready for the final pressing. More hot work is carried out by the pressers as they steam press the sweaters to the customer's satisfaction. After all this work, our sweater is finally starting to look like one of the Winona Knit sweaters you are used to seeing in our stores. But we aren't finished yet. The completed garment is given one final examination at the mill. Each sweater is of course checked for flaws and defects, but don't get the idea that we only check for these things at the end of the manufacturing process. Rigid quality control is maintained throughout the making of our sweaters, and the trained staff at the mill is constantly seeing to it that the quality of the finished product is second to none. When the final quality control examination has taken place, our sweater is at last sent to the packaging department. After careful folding, the sweater is wrapped in plastic to keep it clean and help retain its shape, and is placed in one of these tough cardboard boxes. A good packer can comfortably fit about 30 sweaters into the box. Then the boxes are transferred to the pack and hold area, where they await final shipment out of the mill. The knitting mill has done their job, and now it's up to Winona Knits to see to it that our sweater gets into the hands of a customer. Our truck will pick up the sweater at the mill and bring it to our modern distribution center located on the eastern edge of Winona, Minnesota. Once we have the sweater in our receiving and distribution facility, we unpack it, examine it to be sure it lives up to the famous Winona Knit standards, and lay it out on one of these large tables where we affix the price tags. As we receive the boxes from the mill, all the large sweaters are in one box and all the small are in another. It's our job to sort them out in such a way that our stores will receive the goods they have ordered. Once the order has been filled, the sweater is again packed into a box and sent by UPS to one of our various stores. This distribution process may sound like a simple thing, but with more than 24 stores located in the heart of the Midwest and a projected 5 new stores opening up each year, we find ourselves pretty busy at the Winona Knits Distribution Center. When the order is finally received by the store, they unpack it and carefully check the sweater to be certain it has arrived in good shape and that it is of the high quality that the Winona Knits customer expects. The sweater is then put out onto the shelf to await the discriminating buyer. We have found that a well-made sweater will not stay on the store's shelf for very long, as the demand for our top-quality American-made sweaters increases every year. Here is the moment we have all worked so hard for, the moment when our customer makes the decision to purchase the very best sweater their money can buy, a Winona Knits sweater. A lot of thought and hard work have gone into turning a good idea into a great-looking sweater, and we at Winona Knits hope you better appreciate what it takes to produce the finest sweaters made in America today. We have a simple goal at Winona Knits, and we believe in it strongly enough to have it set in stone. Once you buy a Winona Knits sweater, we know you will believe in it too.